just going to go into more into these host elements. And so we've already had a bit of a look at walls. I'm going to go more into walls shortly, but you'll see already if you look at the properties that come up when you select a wall, a lot of the parameters that you can adjust when you're working with walls, and the important thing to see there. I'll just switch back to Revit and show you. Whenever you select anything, but in this example a wall, the properties that you get in the properties panel there are the properties for that particular element. If you want the properties for that kind of wall or that kind of, well, it's not family, it's the type, clicking Edit Type will give you properties that relate to, in this case, this type of wall, generic 200mm wall. And so it's not a family that we're looking at. It's a basic wall family, but really it's the type properties. And so as you use the walls more, you'll know which properties belong in here and which belong in the element. And you'll find they do chop and change a bit, but just keep an eye on the properties that you get when you select different objects. Wall properties are something that you'll adjust a lot. Things like the base constraint to set the level of the bottom of the wall, top constraint sets the level of the top of the wall, and then the location line we've already looked at, but you can change that after drawing the wall. And you might think, well, what's the point of doing that? But I'll just show you one little trick just so I can show you something about walls here before we move on to onto floors and roofs and ceilings. What if the wall there was drawn the wrong way? So what I mean is, this wall has an inside and an outside. It's hard to see with this kind of wall because it's just got one component. There's no detail in the wall. But I'm going to go to a fine display, and I'm also going to change the wall to double brick, and I'm going to turn on shading. So, you don't need to worry about all those things, but it's all recorded anyway. So the way these walls are set up is with a brown shading on the exterior face and no shading or white on the inside. I'm going to flip the wall so it's the wrong way around, and I'm going to move it. Move it back across. And this happens all the time when people forget which way they've drawn the wall, especially when you're in course where you can't see the detail. So this wall it doesn't look that different to this one, but this one's the right way, this one's the wrong way. And you can tell, even in any view, from the arrow, the little arrow that you use to flip the wall, if you want it to face the other way. So if I click on this one, you can see it's going to flip over the arrow, and the arrow should go on to the exterior side of the wall. So I can tell this one's facing the right way. I've got that little double arrow on the outside. But if I select this wall, that's one that's where I've made a mistake, and the arrow's on the inside. Now if I go to flip that, it's going to be facing the right way, but now the wall's moved. It's not that hard to move it back into position, but that's something you shouldn't have to do. And if you've got lots of things attached to that, and we're going to look at all those things that you can attach in a moment, that are hosted by that wall, it can cause problems. Sometimes objects will just disappear if you flip it. Say, if you've got a WC that's attached to that wall, it can just vanish. So you want it to flip without moving. The trick is to change the location line to wall center line. So there you can actually see the location line between these two grips. Those solid circles at the top and the bottom, they're on the inside face. That's because it used finish face exterior. Now mine's decided to freeze. Here we go, I'll just get that again. Okay, it doesn't want to let me select that. I'll just make this bigger and see if that's going to fix it. Okay, it doesn't seem to want to let me choose that now. So I'll just see if it does on another wall. Yeah, it's just playing up on me. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to set that to wall centerline, which is going to move that location line, you know, to the center. You can see the two grips there now pass through the center of the wall. And now if I flip it, and space here will work as well, just like when you're drawing a wall, or I can click on the arrow, and now it's going to flip over its own center line, so it's not going to move, but it's facing the right way now. And you can actually see that if we, if I go back to fine, the brown shadings on the outside. So I'll put this back to generic 200, and you can see it's changed, but now again I've got a problem because I left it on wall center line. So it's resized it, centered on that location line, and that's going to move it. So again, I need to change the location line back to finish face exterior, and then I can change it to generic 200mm wall, and it's going to stay in place. So lots of little tricks like that, but again, once you've used the program for a while, the reasons for those become a lot clearer. So just trying to get my PowerPoint here. I'm not used to having such a small desktop either. So yeah, we're going to come back and go through lots of other things to do with walls, because if you're making those in different situations. One really handy option you've got is the ability to pick lines, say from AutoCAD or something like that. So you can pick lines and use them to generate walls. We're going to do that before too long. But then you'll see these other host elements, they're also what's called system families. So you can see that's actually at the top of the list there. I didn't really point it out, but you can see just below host elements at the top, I've said they're all, also they are generally system families, all these host elements. Not always, but all the ones we've been looking at so far are system families. But the way you work with floors, roofs and ceilings is quite different to walls because of this thing called sketch mode. So you would have seen this already if you've gone to make one of these things. When you click on the roof tool, now, and when I say that, I mean clicking on the roof button, not the drop down list. If you go to the drop down list, you've got to think about, you know, an option, and basically you don't need to use those options most of the time. So if you click on the main part of the button, that just starts with the default option, which is roof by footprint, and that takes you into a thing called sketch mode. Now, one little thing that extra thing with roof creation, if you make it on the lowest level, it'll come up with the lowest level notice. So it's picking up that you've started to make a roof on the lowest level in your project, and it's assuming you probably don't want a roof there, and it's giving you a chance to choose a different level for that roof. You don't have to. You might want to make a roof on that level, but in most cases you wouldn't, so you can choose a different level. That's just a peculiarity with the roof object now, or with the roof tool. Now, if you make it on a level that isn't the lowest, you don't get that. And look, you'll see after a while, you won't see that message because you'll be in the habit of going to the level that your roof needs to be on. So I instead went to the third level this time, and it didn't ask me if I want to change the roof to a different level. But you might have seen, to cancel the first one, I used the cross up here. And that's really important. When you're making something in sketch mode, you're in sketch mode until you get out of it, either by cancelling what you're doing or completing the object with the tick or the cross that comes up on the ribbon. Now, if you go to a different tab, say if you go to the Home tab, you'll see most of these tools are deactivated. You can't make a wall in the middle of drawing a roof, a sketch for a roof. But you can use some of these tools. Some are still available. Things like reference plane you can make. So not everything's disabled if you go through the tabs. They're there for a reason. You can get to some of the tools, but a lot of them are disabled. So the problem often that you'll run into is not realising you've gone into sketch mode if you accidentally click on the roof tool or something. So just keep an eye out for the green tab that comes up when you're in a particular mode. It's generally going to be at the end of the list of tabs, and it's the active one. So here it's got modify, create roof footprint. If I click onto that, you can see it gives me back the tick and the cross, which if you've got a bigger screen will come up when you're on other tabs as well, but yeah, no, mine isn't big enough. Anyhow, you'll see when you look at release 12, they've rejigged the interface a bit as well, so it's a bit easier to find those. But that's the main thing. When you start working in sketch mode, you've got to be able to get out of it when you don't want to be there. And then the other thing you need to know when you're working in sketch mode is that you're generally drawing 2D shapes, and they're closed shapes most of the time. Not always. Some, like roof by extrusion, you can make open shapes, but generally all the ones you'll be using at first are going to be closed, or have to be closed shapes. It'll give you an error if they're not. And properly closed, like the old school polylines. Nowadays you can get away with polylines where, you know, segments go over each other and things, but you know, you can't in Revit. It's like polylines used to be, and so every endpoint's got to be connected to another endpoint. Here I'm making a roof, and so unfortunately you can't see my draw panel until I click on this button, but hopefully you can all see that now. And so you can draw all these different shapes, just like when you're drawing a wall. But it gives you an extra option, which is pick walls. And pick walls obviously lets you pick a wall to make an edge. And here on the options bar, you can see I've also got an option to set an overhang. I'm going to make that 400. And I just thought I should point out, pick walls does a lot of things that aren't obvious. There's one next to it, pick lines, which is kind of similar. But just remember that one, pick walls, if you can use it, it's generally the best way to make the edges of your roof. And you'll see why later on, but just remember that one, it's really, really useful. Now, and I've gone and lost my overhang, I'll put that in again. Now, you'll see as I move the mouse over the edge of the wall, I've got a little dashed line coming up on one side of the wall or the other, depending on where my cursor is. If I go closer to the outside, I'm going to get an eave, you know, on the outside of the building. And then you'll see once I've picked it to make the edge, it's also going to come up with a slope. Now, that's there because I left on the options bar this other option on. Don't worry about extending to wall core, we'll look at that later. But overhang and define slope are the two main ones. So with define slope on, it's going to slope from that side. And what I'm trying to get here is a gable end on the top and the bottom. So by sloping from the left and the right, I'm just going to leave it with the default 30-degree slope, and then turning off define slope when I pick the top and the bottom, I'm going to get a gable roof. Now, notice how it's, sorry, did I pick the outside there? Yep, okay. Because I was fiddling around too much, it hasn't been nice and joined the corners like it normally would. You probably, if you've done this already, would have seen that it automatically will join those corners most of the time, but not always. So it's handy to remember some of these editing tools that you have in the modify panel. If you know them in AutoCAD, it'll take you no time to learn them in Revit. There's just a few that are different. So, you know, the symbols even are basically the same. Offset, copy, move, rotate, they all use the same symbols as you have in AutoCAD, and you know, you'll see that the interface is slightly different, but the way those commands work is basically the same. The one that uses the same name as the AutoCAD command trim, unfortunately works pretty differently, but it's easiest just to think of it as a fillet with 0 radius. There is a fillet as well. You'll see over in the draw panel you can do a fillet arc if you want a radius. But this one here, trim with the just arrows pointing to the corner, just works like a fillet 0 radius. So by choosing that, you can then choose any two objects and join them together at a corner. That's just if you don't have the lines connected. So it has to be a closed shape. That's the easiest way to make one. So I'm going to finish that that sketch now, clicking on the tick, and then you'll see in the 3D view. So I'm going to make one now. I know I've skipped over the views section, but I'm going to come back to that and do it just in the order of the slides. Oh, and here, that's why it didn't join them for me, because my walls aren't joined because of what I was doing before with the walls. I'll fix that later. Or maybe even now I can try trimming. That should fix them. There we go. So I've got a gable end on the two ends of my roof. Now, also you would have seen in the notes, if you had to go at the next part, that you can attach these walls. So I'm just going to use a shortcut, pressing tab with my cursor over one of the walls. First time I press tab, it'll give me a chain of the 4 walls, and then I can click to select all 4. Over here you can tell how many you have selected. Also down at the bottom of the status bar, it'll tell you always how many there are, whether you've got properties or not. And now I get the attach tool on the ribbon. Attach top base is the one I want, and then I can select the roof. So that's tied them in. I've just turned shading on so it's a bit easier to see. So they are attached. It's not just bringing it up to where the roof is now. If I go back and change the roof, the walls will go with it. And just looking at the slope, the way you can use that to make different roof forms, I think it's a really good way of getting an idea how roof by footprint really works. And sketch mode as well, just generally. So with that roof selected, I'm going to click Edit Footprint, and I'm back to the sketch that I used to make that roof. And you can see it in 3D view. That's fine. You can actually work with it, I think, pretty easily in a 3D view, or if you prefer, you can switch to another view like a plan. So I might want the roof to only slope from one side, so for skillion or something. I can select the edge over on the right here, and you can see the option that I used before to make that edge define slope on the options bar. I'll turn that off. Tick again to finish the sketch. Now what we're seeing there is the roof cut, so there's a cut plane height in this view. That's why the roof looks a bit funny there. But in the site plan, we're looking from above, and that's how the roof looks now without a ridge. And back in the 3D view, you can see the wall follows the change. And also you can use these arrows to adjust the slope, by the way, as well, without going back into sketch mode. But I'm going to go back to sketch mode and make a hip roof now by, again, just clicking Edit Footprint to get my sketch. And even in the 3D view, I can still select those 3 lines just with Control, and I'll turn on Define Slope for all 4 edges. Tick, and now I've got a hip. So you can make most of the basic roof forms just using roof by footprint, if you just think about which edge it needs to slope from. The only one you can't do, or the only common roof shape you can't do with roof by footprint, is a curved roof, and you've got roof by extrusion for that. So we'll look at that one later on. But you can do, if you want to do hyperbolic, roof shapes, you can with the other option, roof by face. But roof by footprint will give you 90% of the roof shapes you need. The roof tool is actually the most complex one of the 3, roof, floor and ceiling. They all work in a really similar way, but the roof tool gives you the option of both the eaves and the slope. The floor tool, on the other hand, doesn't have any of those options. You can put an offset in if you want, but most of the time you don't have to. So here, again, we've got the same option, pick walls. So I'm going to pick the outside of all of these walls. And I could have used tab, but that's okay, I can pick them all. But remember, it's got to be a closed shape, so that won't work, because of these lines not connecting at the end. So I can just use trim to join those together, and now finish the floor, and I've got a simple floor slab that runs under the whole building. So then, applying a similar approach, you can put a roof onto this one, and I'll just go back to that level. And so just to keep it as a simple level, I'm going to use the, well, it says this in the notes anyway, the second level, rather than making a level just for this roof. So I'm going to use the roof tool with the same overhang and define slope on for the first two edges either side of the extension, the two longer walls. And then I'm going to turn define slope off for the end wall. So that's similar to what I did with the other roof. But now is the part that maybe isn't so obvious. I want the roof to stop at this wall just below the sketch there, and the one just to the left, or whichever in the centre, sort of, that vertical wall. I want the roof to stop right on the edge of that wall. So if I've got an overhang, there's going to be a gap between the roof and the wall. So the overhang needs to be 0. Also, there's no way I want defined slope here. I don't want it to slope from that edge where it just needs to stop. So it's really important that defined slope isn't on there, or you're going to get sort of a sparrow beak sort of thing. So, so now I can simply pick the edge of this wall and the other one, and that's where my roof will finish. But I need to still make it a closed shape. So using trim, I can join those lines together, just like I did with the floor. So I've got a closed shape now in the shape of the roof I want, with the slope just coming from these two sides, which is going to leave me with a gable end up here. So finish, back in the 3D mode, and that's the form I want. But again, I need to attach these walls. But selecting them with tab works really well there, and then attach top base, and I can select the roof. And that's how you do the sketch for that one. So I'll just quickly show you the last one. I'll give you some time maybe to try this out. The floor on level 2, basically it's done in a similar way. There's just one extra tool you need to know about when you're making this floor. Again, to begin with, it's just done with pick walls. This time I'm picking on the inside edge just to keep it simple. I don't want to have to worry at this stage about the way you do the structure, or the way the floor can key into the walls. Revit will do that really well, but I'm not going to worry right now. I'm just going to stick the floor on the inside. And so then I want to add a balcony to this floor. I know normally you'd want it stepping down, so you'd use a separate floor, but just as an example, you can add that shape to this floor. So I can't use pick walls. Yeah, normally, it's the way to go, but there's no walls, so I've got to use a different option. So either line, and I can just with the straight line segment draw a line that comes across from the wall there, and then below the line tool you've got some different options for curves, and the one right below the line tool is probably the easiest to use at first. Start end radius arc, which lets you, or makes you choose the start and the end of the arc first, and then the midpoint or the middle point to define the curve. So it's a lot like 3-point arc in AutoCAD, except instead of going first, middle, and then end, you go beginning, end, and then middle. Don't know why they didn't just do it the way it is in AutoCAD, but that's just the way it is. So now using the line tool again, and you can switch midstream like I have there, and then I can come back to the left and finish it there. It doesn't matter if it's not touching even, because I'm going to join it in a second. So then the thing here that is can seem very strange when you've been using trim in AutoCAD for 20 years, which I know, AutoCAD had trim with multiple edges more than 20 years ago. Revit still doesn't have it. Don't know why, but it doesn't. So it's not a big deal. You hardly ever need it, but unfortunately, if you want to trim with 2 edges, and that is what I want to do here, I want to trim with this edge and this edge. What you need to do is break this line first. So I want to trim that line at the edge of the balcony at the top and the bottom. So I can't use trim and choose those 2 edges. I need to first use split, which is just near the trim tool. You've got that the first small button in the modify panel there. Split element. And then, just by picking that vertical line anywhere, that's going to break it into 2 pieces. And now I can use the regular trim that I used before and join these at the top and the bottom. So there's just that little difference in the way that you do things in Revit. But it's not as big a problem as you might think, because you don't need to draft as much in Revit. Still, it'd be nice if they put it in there one day maybe. So that's going to work as a floor, because it's a closed shape. Tick, and here's the well, not conundrum, but the thing you need to maybe just remember as a rule of thumb for now. It's going to ask you, would you like the walls that go up to this floor's level to attach to its bottom? Generally, no. Only interior walls. You don't want exterior walls stopping at a floor, usually. So for exterior walls, I just pretty much always say no to that one. If it's a roof, different story. The next question, would you like join geometry and cut the overlapping volume out of the walls? Yes, for that one. So no to attaching. This is just with floors. No to attaching, yes to joining. And I'll show you the difference. If I say yes to join, now in my section, I'll just move my section so we can see it. Okay, what it's done is cleaned up the join. Basically, that's what joining does. If it wasn't joined, would look like, like that. So they'd just be overlapping. When they're joined, and join, you'll see, is one of the best tools in Revit for cleaning things up. With join, Revit knows how these things should go together. They've spent years working out the way things should go together in the hierarchy of objects. So it's pretty good at working this out. You can tell it if you want to, but it's usually pretty good at doing it. So just by joining these 2 objects, and that's what it did automatically by me saying yes, I want to join. The floor takes precedence over the wall, which is usually the way it should be. Now that's joining. Attaching, on the other hand, is different. Attaching would look like this. If I attached the wall to that floor, that's what I get. The wall stops at the floor. So where the floor comes out into the wall's going to stop there, which here wouldn't make much sense, unless we wanted an opening going all the way across, I suppose. But we're going to put a door there, so don't want that. So that's just my general rule of thumb. I think it works pretty well. No when it asks you to attach, yes to joining. Unless it's the roof at the top of the building or above a series of walls, then you might want it to automatically attach to that. But I'll go right through all those little options later when we go into detailing when it really makes a difference. But as you're doing this, it's worth just having a look at the section and seeing how it's going, and the way that it does tend to give you things the way they should be. And I'll show you how you can make this a perfect section later, but for now that's okay for a simple one. And oh no, sorry, before I stop that video, the last thing is in the slide there, which has gone off the screen, ceilings, really easy. So it's gone, and once it doesn't want to take that away. But ceilings, once you understand floors and roofs, are pretty straightforward because they're made in almost exactly the same way by drawing a sketch, going to that 2D sketch mode, where you can either cancel or tick to finish. The only difference is the way the height is set, and we'll look at that later when we look at ceiling plans. But I'm sure if you have a go at making a ceiling, you'll get it to work, as long as you remember you're in sketch mode when you make those. And they're all your main system families. So there's a few others, but they're the main ones. Once you can get those working, the rest work pretty well as well.